Hello. In this video, we'll look at the accounting concept cash over or short. Have you ever paid for a purchase with cash? Did you get back too much money or too little? You're not alone. This happens regularly in businesses that accept cash payments from customers, and that is why many businesses are no longer accepting cash payments. The issue of counting out too little or too much money is one of the reasons for that. But there are plenty of other reasons. Having cash on site exposes the business to theft or robbery, but there are also additional tasks that occur when a business accepts cash. For instance, employees need to be bonded, which means that their employer has purchased an insurance policy, also known as a fidelity bond, to protect the company from losses caused by employee dishonesty. Also keep in mind that there is more work involved if the business accepts cash. It has to be counted before the cashier begins the shift and after, and employees have to go to the bank to make deposits. It is a lot more convenient to only accept cashless payments. But that is not the reality in many businesses today, and that is why we will tackle the topic of cash over short today and how accountants deal with the situation when there is too much cash or too little. I recommend that you take out a piece of paper and write down how we record the cash over short transactions. The activity of actually writing it down will help you remember how to record the transactions. Let's get started. In most businesses that accept cash, errors occur from time to time when cashiers are making change. It could be carelessness, a stressful environment, disruptions, or many other reasons. And there are only two situations we accountants need to deal with when there is an error. The cash in the cash register is either more or less than the cash listed on the cash register tape. When cash receipts are more than the sales per the cash register tape, cash is over. When cash receipts are less than the sales per the cash register tape, cash is short. Keep in mind that cash tends to be short more often than over because customers are likely to notice and complain if they receive too little change. Regardless of whether the cash is over or short, we record the transactions to the same general ledger account, cash short or over. The business should also keep track of who the employees are that most frequently have cash shortages or overages. It might mean that the managers need to figure out how to train more effectively or remove barriers that are keeping employees from counting out cash correctly. Here's an example of Christie's Cupcakes, a retail business that started on June 25th. It keeps a $300 change fund in its register. So that means that the company always has $300 in the register, and the cashier starts with $300 in the morning. And at the end of the day, after the sales money for the day has been deposited, there should still be $300 in the register. In this video, I'll focus on how to record the transactions in the general journal. Let's look at the first transaction. The cash sales for the day per the cash register tape were $1,237. And the cashier counted $1,531 in the register. Our goal is to figure out whether the cashier has the correct amount of money for the day. We do that by subtracting the $300 cash that the cashier started with from the end of day cash count. So the cash count is $1,531. We subtract the change fund of $300 from the cash count because the change fund was there when the cashier started, and the change fund needs to remain in the register. An important step for the cashier is to count the change fund at the beginning of the shift so that the cashier verifies that they truly received the correct amount. So again, we subtract the change fund of $300 from the cash count of $1,531 at the end of the day. In our example for June 25th, that leaves us with an amount of $1,231 that the business is going to deposit in the bank account. Now we're going to compare what the business is going to deposit of $1,231 with the sales of the day of $1,237. And we find that the deposit is less than the sales. In other words, we have less cash than we should have had. What do we do now? How do we record our general journal? Let's start with what we know and enter the date, and then the account cash in the description. We know how much cash we deposited. It was $1,231. We'll write that amount into the debit column of the general journal. On the next line, we enter GL account cash short or over into the description column. When the business has a cash shortage, it is like an additional expense of the business. Maybe you're wondering, why don't we just record the cash deposit as sales? The reason is that the business wants to show accurate sales. For one, the sales account on the income statement has to match the sales register. In addition, businesses want to track to what extent cash shortages or overages impact the business. So again, when the business has a cash shortage, it is like an additional expense of the business, and we record that with a debit. On the next line, we slightly indent and write sales into the description column and the amount of $1,237 into the credit column. This is the amount from the sales register tape. If you're struggling with this journal entry, start by writing the cash line first and the amount that was deposited. Then leave a blank line and write the sales from the sales register tape on the third line. Then compare the debit and the credit and decide where the cash short or over should be debited or credited. After all, both sides of debits and credits must balance. Let's look at the second transaction that occurred on June 26th. We start by subtracting the change fund of $300 from the cash count at the end of the day. Now, our example for June 26th, that leaves us with an amount of $1,342 that the business is going to deposit in the bank account. Now we're going to compare what the business is going to deposit of $1,342 with the sales for the day of $1,350. We find that the deposit is less than the sales by $8. In other words, we have less cash than we should have had. We're now ready to record the journal entry. Let's start with what we know and enter the date, and then the account cash into the description. We know how much cash we deposited. It was $1,342. We'll write that amount into the debit column of the journal entry. We'll leave a blank line on line 2 for now and write the sales from the sales register tape on the third line. That is $1,350. Now let's compare the debit and the credit and decide where the cash short or over should be debited or credited. After all, both sides of debits and credits must balance. So I have $1,342 as a debit, and I have $1,350 as a credit. Where do we have to put the $8 that we have as a shortage to balance this entry? That's right. It needs to go on the debit side. Let's write the account cash short or over on the second line, and a debit of $8 into the debit column. You can see now that both sides have the same total, $1,350 on the debit side and $1,350 on the credit side, which means that our entry balances. Now let's look at an example with the cash overage. The third transaction occurred on June 27th. We start by subtracting the change fund of $300 from the cash count at the end of the day. Now, example for June 27th, that leaves us with an amount of $1,363 that the business is going to deposit in the bank account. Now we're going to compare what the business is going to deposit of $1,363 with the sales for the day of $1,358. And we find that the deposit is more than the sales by $5. In other words, we have more cash than we should have had based on the sales register tape. We're now ready to record the journal entry. Let's start with what we know and enter the date first, and then the account cash into the description. We know how much cash we deposited. It was $1,363. We'll write that amount into the debit column of the general journal. We'll leave a blank line on line 2 for now and write the sales from the sales register tape on the third line. That is $1,358. Now let's compare the debit and the credit and decide where the cash short or over should be debited or credited. After all, both sides of debits and credits must balance. So I have $1,363 as a debit, and I have $1,358 as a credit. Where do we have to put the $5 that we have as an overage to balance this entry? Yes, it needs to go on the credit side. Let's indent slightly and write the account cash short or over on the second line and a credit of $5 into the credit column. Does our entry balance? Yes, it does. Both sides show a total of $1,363. Now that you know how to record the cash over and short transaction, why don't you give the next transaction a try on your own? Pause the video here and write down the general journals for the transactions that occurred on June 28th, 29th, and 30th. And when you're ready, I'll show you what the correct journal entries are, and you have a chance to compare them. How did you do? Congratulations if you got the entries correct. If you had difficulties with the entries, don't worry. Go back to the beginning of the video and watch it again. You'll be able to master the concept of cash over short with a little bit more practice.